Mine's still playing.
Ah, bad girl.
Never fails. I turn it down before it begins and bing. Well, good evening, everyone. Glad to see you're here. Welcome to Andromeda 7 Celestial Gateway. And we are your gateway to community support, friendship, service, love. And we are very thrilled this evening to get Scotty Roberts back on with us. Thank you very much for coming, Scotty.
Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, tonight we're going to be discussing the research and time and effort and what Scotty learned with his 30 plus some years of looking into this topic of the rise and fall of the Nephilim, which is one of the many books Scotty has written on the subject, amongst other books that he writes. And he will be the first to tell you that he is not saying that this is the document any way of scientific proof or evidence, but it's more of his research into all of the world's since the beginning of time, pretty much, of the stories, the similarities and stories of cultures across the planet. That this really did take place and really did happen, and it's possible, and everybody agrees. There might not be any hard proof or scientific proof, but there's enough evidence out there to suggest, in the stories alone, to suggest that there's some validation here, not only of the giants, but of our origins and celestial origins, star people. And David Null is here as well from his channel. Everybody knows David.
Always good to see David Null. You betcha.
Hawkeye Two Feathers, my shaman in training and my personal shaman. He really is.
Greetings and blessings, everybody.
Thank you for coming, David. And he has a lot that he's looked into and talked about over the years, and not only in terms of what went on in the Middle East, but here in our Western cultures and traditions in the Native American countries. We have our two friends from Australia, Jules, the alchemist, and Mandy Moo, our crazy crystal alchemist. We're both alchemists. I got alchemists on either side of me. So
both crazy.
There's Aboriginal stories too, tell of the giants, the titans. We just had Jules' nephew on not so long ago talking about one of the creation stories, Kieran. And he talked about the titans, the twin brothers that fought for the earth. So anyway, without further ado, our great intrepid radio host, author, graphic artist, best storyteller in the world, and if you ask me, one of the finest scholars, even though he'll say, "I'm not a scholar." Yes, you are.
Yes.
Because he really puts a lot of research and effort into what he does, and he doesn't mess around. He breaks things down in a way that really helps you understand and learn. So, Scotty, I'm just going to turn it over to you. I thought we would go through how you finally got to the point of writing this book, what brought you to it, and some folks here don't know your background. A lot of us do, because you were on with Jeff Dougherty for a long time too, right?
I was. And so, it's interesting because you talk about not being a scholar, and I make jokes about that because my degree, I originally went to seminary. I was getting my master's in divinity to be in ministry. And I ended up instead going into advertising for 35 years. And I was a youth pastor in the middle of there, way at the very beginning. But some of the criticisms of the books I write on the Nephilim, the reptilians, on the Exodus, and things like that, I've had those critical circles out there that will say, well, we can't really accept your work. You're not a credentialed scholar. Where are the letters behind your name? And I said, let me ask you, let me flip that question back on you. I said, I've been a creative illustrator and designer in advertising and publishing for the last 30 years. And I said, I don't have a degree in any of those. There's no letters behind my name saying I know how to draw a picture. And I said, so by your reckoning, I said, my art is all fraudulent art because I don't have a degree. And I said, now you're telling me all my writing is fraudulent because I don't have a degree in these topics. I said, but I will bet you I've spent hundreds of thousands more hours of study on these things than you have. So that's how I kind of answer that question. And so I got my start seminary. I drifted far afield from the faith I was in, very conservative, fundamentalist, Baptist. And I had a lot of questions. And so it had to be at least 20 years ago. I just really kind of separated myself from it. And so you can call me a devout agnostic, and is what I became. And I had one of the first questions I had was the question on the Nephilim, because in the book of Genesis chapter 6, verse 1, and the next 4 verses talk about how the sons of God, the Bene Elohim, came down to the earth and intermingled with the daughters of men, Adam, and had children by them. And then it talks about them being the Nephilim, and then the heroes of old and the men of renown and things like this. And so I went to one of my seminary professors and I said, you teach us that words mean things and that language is vital. If you've ever heard a Baptist minister preach, he'll go, I want you to turn in your Bibles to this chapter and verse, and now we're going to go to the original Koine Greek, and we're going to see what Paul had to say in the Greek. And so, this is the stuff we would hear all the time. So I studied Koine Greek, I studied Hebrew, I studied about that much Aramaic.
Wow.
And don't remember any of it. But I went to my seminary professor and I said, you say words mean something and that the original language says something. I said, in this verse where it talks about the sons, it says in the English, the sons of God came down and intermingled with the daughters of men and had children by them. And I said, now let me ask you a question. In the Hebrew, it says the Bene Elohim, those who are the sons of the Elohim or sons of the Elohim. And I said, who are the Elohim? I said, it talks about God. The name for God used almost 2,700 times in the Old Testament is the word Elohim. El being the name for God, and Him being the suffix that in Hebrew you would place on a word to denote plurality. So Elohim was God, literally translated, God of or among many gods. I said, so now we've got the Bene Elohim, the sons of the God of or among many gods. And I said, so first question I have is, who are these Elohim? There's a plurality that's being spoken, and we talked about that. And then I said, but then it says they intermingled with the daughters of Adam, the daughters of man. And I said, and they had this offspring. And he goes, oh, I know where you're going with that, Scotty. And he said, you got to give up the idea that this is something weird or something celestial or something spiritual. And he said, all this really means, he says, is that the sons of the men who built the schools of the prophets, that they went down, literally slumming down into the valley, picked up the valley women and had sex with them and had children by them. And I said, but the problem is that's not what the text says. I said, if that's what it was, why didn't it say the sons of the men who built the school of the prophets went down and married women? And I said, it doesn't say that. Then you go to the book of Enoch for cross-referencing. And some people will say, well, the book of Enoch, that's just a strange book. It's not really a biblical book. It was cast out of the canon of scripture in the councils convoked by Constantine and others. And I said, yet you say it's cast out and it doesn't count. Yet isn't that a book that several of the minor prophets in the Old Testament quoted from? That's a book that Paul the Apostle quoted from. It's a book that even Jesus himself in the Gospels quotes from. I said, if it's good enough for those guys, why isn't it good enough for us? And so these were the questions that started coming up. And I was basically told at the end of that, Scotty, don't cause trouble. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, in a nice way. And so I went on through my seminary days and into ministry even, and this question always plagued me. And it wasn't a going thing. It wasn't like every day, but it was one of those things I kept coming back to. And then I would find other problems in scripture that were problems for me. So that's how I ended up drifting away. That's how I ended up eventually writing this book. I wrote an article for a magazine. It was TAPS Para magazine. And I wrote an article on the Nephilim, which actually almost word for word became the prologue to the book itself. And I was just looking for it over here. That's why you saw the back of my head at the beginning. I was looking for the book. I've actually got it. We've got it in English, and my publisher had it translated into Spanish and also into Chinese.
Oh, wow.
So I was going to show you the Chinese version and make a joke, but now I don't have it. So, but
that's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. I can't read a word of it, by the way. So, and just as an aside, I know we have limited time, but it's like this one. This was the Exodus reality. And this is my publisher sent this to me. It's still shrunk wrapped, but there it is in Chinese. So
wow, that's cool.
Very cool.
I've got that one in the Reptilians too. That's another great book, The Reptilians.
That's in Spanish. Teresa, you know this. I was down working in Louisiana for about 3 months, and we had a Mexican work crew, and our crew chief, and he would say he said, "Oh, Scotty, you read books. I want to read your book." And I go, "Hey, I happen to have one in Spanish for you." And he goes, "No, don't give me Spanish. I don't read that." He says, "I read English. I grew up reading English." So I gave the only Spanish-speaking Mexican I know wanted an English version of the book.
You just happened to carry these books with you when you went down to Louisiana?
I took 2 down with me after I came back here and visited. He had said he wanted to see a book, so I took one with me. So
I was going to say committed road.
Yeah, there you go.
Books with you.
Where can they purchase your book?
My name is Scotty. By the way, here's my book. No, I don't do that. It just I fetched some when I was home. No, so this whole thing about the Nephilim, it really, one of the first understandings I had of the passage was that now we all learned, if you went to Sunday school or synagogue, we learned the story of Noah and the ark. And we learned all about Noah and the ark. I mean, what were we taught about the great flood in the Bible? Well, that it was brought on by the wickedness of mankind, and it had grieved God that he made man, and he was going to wipe them all out with this great deluge. But there was one guy, Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, it said. And God came to him and said, basically, you're the only righteous dude left, you and your family, and I'm going to build this ark, and I'm going to wipe out all of mankind, so on. And so I started looking at that story and just reading those versions smack of such mythology that I started trying to dig into whatever you could about the text and the writing of the text and comparative texts and so on. And what I found the text was really saying in the Hebrew, it didn't say, we've always interpreted in English as the wickedness that of man is why God wiped them out with the great flood. And yet in the text, it speaks of the wickedness brought to mankind that corrupted mankind, and God wiped them out. And apparently it was what I came down with all my research was it was this hybrid race that was created between these celestial beings and human women, and they had this race. And they infiltrated the whole of humanity. And that Noah's family, or Noah, the only reason he was chosen by God, according to the, and let's keep it squarely in our heads. This is Hebrew mythology. This is biblical mythology. The only reason he chose Noah is because Noah's family, Noah was supposed to be one of the only pure-blooded left. Noah was chosen because he was righteous. And how does it state it in the scripture? It says he was righteous and pure in all his generations. Now, what that literally means, that phrase, is that his bloodline was pure of the mixed blood of the celestial beings. So his bloodlines were pure. And I had, the same critic who was criticizing me for not having letters behind my name also wrote an article on me saying how racist I was, because I was saying Scotty Roberts claims that there are pure-blooded humans and non-pure-blooded humans. That's about as racist as it gets.
Oh, God.
And I said, you've got to be kidding me. I said, you do realize I was talking about celestial beings, not different races on Earth. And so when I started putting all this together, remember in the book of Genesis, in the Garden of Eden story, it has the serpent character tempting Eve, and Eve takes the fruit from the tree. It says she tastes it. Well, first it says she looked on it and saw that it was good and it would make her wise. And so I do that. And I got to tell you, every time I walk through the supermarket, I don't pick up, a banana and go, now there is a fruit that will make me wise. I don't do that. I pick it up because I want to taste it. I want to, and so she takes the fruit and then says she gave it to Adam, her husband. And he also ate of the fruit. And what happens? Poof, suddenly they're both naked. And so I always wondered, this all ties into the Nephilim story. I started wondering, what does nudity or the realization that I'm naked have to do with eating this fruit?
That's what I wanted to know. I was like,
and we were always taught, just like the flood story, that there was the tree at the center of the Garden of Eden that Adam and Eve were forbidden to eat of. The tree of life, we were told it was. Yet the passage in Genesis says, I'm, Mandy, I'm noticing your tattoos. Do you happen to have a tree of life? No. Okay. I saw you smiled when I said tree of life. So I wondered, my wife has a big tree of life on her back of her shoulders. So, but, there you go. Not a nice art, but not tree of life. So, but the tree of life, this was what we were told was at the center of the garden. Yet when you read the text, and it's so obvious, I don't know why we missed this. It says, and all of a sudden, after they found out they were naked, it says, now we're Elohim. It says Elohim, the God of many gods, the God among many gods. It says, and Elohim said, the humans have eaten of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and have become just like us. Plural. Let us therefore go down and confound them and prevent them from also eating of the tree of life, lest they become immortal. And so it was an interesting story. When I started reading it, I thought, what does God, first of all, what did he have against his creation having knowledge? They've eaten of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and become, well, now we got to prevent them from also becoming immortal. And so he goes down, and we know the story. He looks for Adam. Adam, where are you, Adam? And Adam's like, I'm over here. I'm hiding. Why are you hiding? And he said, because I'm naked. And God said to him, well, who told you you were naked? And Adam said, well, the woman, she gave me this fruit. And the woman's like, well, it was the snake. It was the snake. And so God, what does he do? The snake character in the Old Testament, by the way, it calls him Nakosh in the Hebrew language. Nakosh simply means the bright shining one, the bringer, the illuminator, the bringer of forbidden knowledge, and which is also common to many other cultures, stories of first families and temptations by, like the Lakota have Iktope, the trickster. They have other characters all throughout different cultures. And so Nakosh, God pronounces a curse on him. The first thing he says to the serpent, he says, there will be a day when you will crush his head, but he will return. You will bite his heel, but he will return and crush your head. Mm-hmm. And by rabbinic scholars and Christian scholars, with almost without fault, all seem to agree that this is the first messianic prophecy in the Old Testament, delivered at the time of all this hubbub in the Garden of Eden, saying there's going to be a Messiah that would come, a Savior that would come. You'll bite his heel, he'll crush your head. This was a messianic prophecy. And all through the Old Testament, then, you have the Messiah being known in the Jewish term terminology as the kinsman redeemer. Now, this is where I'm going with this. This is why all of that prelude to get to this. The kinsman redeemer was the one who would be one of us redeemer. And you find this laced through the whole Old Testament. All the genealogies in the Old Testament. Have you ever picked up and read the book of Numbers just for fun? You got 14 chapters of, and Lamech begat Samhael, and Samhael lay with 2 women and begat 5 sons, and his firstborn was Jedediah, and Jedediah begat, and that's all it is.
I was actually stupid enough to lay it all out on paper and write it all down so I could try to see if I could follow it.
And make a great piece of wall art. You should make a poster and sell it. And so what I found was this, is that when it came down to Noah, it was saying that, remember, God said to Noah, you're the only righteous man, you're pure in all your generations, and I'm going to destroy this hybrid race, which is wreaking havoc on the earth and bringing evil and has inbred into all of humanity except for you and your family. Well, we don't know if that was so. Even in the story, it's just this is God chose him. And the reason this was so important, this pure in all his generations, was because of this kinsman redeemer issue. That's, in a sense, the concept of a Messiah, of a coming Messiah in pre-Judaism, in Hebrew religion, was the idea that there would be the kinsman redeemer, the one who was one of us, the one that was of pure bloodlines that were human. And we kept reading this all through the Old Testament, the kinsman redeemer, the pure one, the Messiah, the one who was one of us. You even go to church nowadays at Christmas time, and they talk about Jesus being the Messiah, and they say, because he was one of us, and so on. This was the concept that followed all the way through. And there's one thing that was obviated in the Old Testament, and that is, if you've got so much talk about there being the one pure-blooded race, the race that the kinsman redeemer must sprout from, he has to be of the pure blood, totally human. It's obviating that there's something that he could not be, which was of the race of Nakash, because there is this theory that it's called the serpent seed theory. Now, this has been corrupted over the years, and the serpent seed theory, it does tie into even early Nazism and racism and all of this. But the idea is that what happened in the Garden of Eden is like you see in many other cultural stories of first families. The children of, the first family either bore twins or triplets or quadruplets or quintuplets or sextuplets even in some cultures. And so when Eve gave birth to Cain and Abel, the famous story of the brothers, the one murders the other, it says this: God had said when he was cursing them all, he declared that messianic prophecy, and then he said, the seed of the serpent shall ever be at enmity between the seed between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. And he was talking about this mixed seed that not only did Nakash, who was probably not a snake at all, it's a figurative Nakash, you never see him called a snake, but he is one of, and I believe there is a lot of verification for this in the Old Testament. Nakash was one of the caste of the Elohim, the divine council they're referred to in Psalm 82. And God, or Elohim, stood in the midst of the Elohim, and he said to them, you are all Elohim, the bright shining princes of heaven. But then he goes to cast judgment on them, almost like Zeus over a caste of minor gods. And now in the Old Testament, Nakash, he's the bright shining one, the bringer, the same language used for the Nakash, for the Elohim in Psalm 82. So what happens here? You see this whole progression in the Old Testament of the kinsman redeemer, the seed of the woman. There must be the pure human seed. They trace Abraham back to Adam. They trace David, the king, back to Adam. They trace even when they get up to Mary, the mother of Jesus in the New Testament, they trace her bloodlines back to Adam. But it's all through Noah, back to Adam. Why are they doing this? To establish in both Jewish tradition and Christian tradition that the Messiah, their accepted Messiah, was of the pure human blood. Because what happened in the Garden of Eden? Nakash impregnated Eve, and Adam also impregnated Eve. She took the fruit and brought it to Adam. In essence, what it was a big secret encoded message there that this forbidden knowledge was sexual relation, and that Nakash had sex with Eve, Adam had sex with Eve, she bore twins. She was the mother of the son of Nakash and the son of Adam, both at the same time. And this is a medical possibility. My own twin daughters, we were told that they 29 years ago, when they were born, that they were conceived almost 10 days apart. And I didn't even know that was possible. So dual conceptions making twins. So all of that to say is that now you get up to the Nephilim and you try to decode and decipher who these Nephilim are. The Nephilim, it says, are those who came down to the earth and they impregnated. I believe Cain was the first of the Nephilim. Mm-hmm. And Abel was the son of Adam. He was the son of the Nephilim. Then what does it say Cain did? He's cast out of the garden. God puts a mark on him, a special mark on him, so nobody would kill him. And of course, the age-old question, well, who's going to kill him? There's what, 3 people? By my reckoning, there were 4. There was Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel. Oops, chicken scratch through Abel now. And so you got the 3 of them. And I've heard, even in seminary, the theologians, great theologians, talking about, well, there was obviously a special dispensation that God gave humans back then that they could have sex with brothers and sisters and cousins and so on to help spread the population around the earth. Yet it doesn't say that anywhere. The words mean something and it's not there. It tells that Eve had Cain and Abel. Then Eve, after Abel's death, had a 3rd son, and she named him Seth to replace my lost son Abel, she says. And so Cain's already grown that, and he leaves the Garden of Eden. What does he do? It says he goes east to the land of Nod, which is basically Iraq today. And because, by the way, if you didn't know this, you can pinpoint the Garden of Eden from the descriptions given in the Old Testament. And so down under the Black Sea area. But he goes east to Iraq, and he establishes, he builds the first city. And the first city, he named it Uruk. And Uruk, U-R-U-K. And if you, I can't explain how it did this, but ancient linguistics, the U becomes an E, the R becomes an N as time goes on. So Uruk became Enoch. And it says, remember, it says in the Old Testament, he built the first city and he named it after his son, Enoch. And so Enoch is really the same basic word as the first, well, it's defined as first beautiful city. And that city, according to mythology, if you follow it all the way back far enough, it just says that city still exists today. And you can go to that city and see it. And it's still a thriving metropolis in Iraq. And so what do you got here now? You got a son of the Nephilim, half human, half Elohim in Cain. You've got the pure-blooded son now, Seth, who carries on. And now, if you notice, in all of the genealogies, what did they do? They kept bringing, the genealogy always started with, no matter how many sons the dude had, in all these genealogies, it always goes back to the firstborn son. The firstborn son carried the birthright. The firstborn son carried the family name, and so on and so on and so on. And always his first son is the one all through all these genealogies until you get all the way back to Adam, because the first son would have been one of the twins, Cain. Why don't they take the bloodlines through Cain? Because Cain was not of pure human blood. They had to go to Seth, the third born, to carry the bloodline. Seth was the firstborn of the human bloodline of Adam. And so when you start figuring this stuff out, and you look at the linguistics, and you look at ancient lexicons to find out what did the languages mean compared to other languages of the day, you come up, your mind gets blown. Because, and the reason it blew my mind was because these are not the stories I grew up with. And, very rarely did we hear stories of, the Garden of Eden. And then the teacher would take the little cutout felt characters, they put them on the felt boards for little kids. Oh, and this is Nakash. He came down and had sex with Eve. We didn't learn that story. So all of these stories start to comprise the background for Genesis 6:1. And Elohim, and the sons of Elohim, the Bene Elohim, came down and intermingled with the daughters of Adam, of men, and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, the men of renown, and the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. And by the way, I am also almost considering rewriting certain things about the Nephilim, because
you mentioned you were going to have another book.
There is. They're going to do a second edition, and but this one came out in 2012, and so they're doing a new edition now. But one thing that always bothered me about the text, we always thought that the Elohim who came down, the sons of Elohim, sons of God who intermingled with the daughters of men, we know them also as the Watchers, that they came down and they intermingled with the daughters of men and had children by them. Yet the way the language is in the Hebrew, it says, and they had children by them, and these became the heroes of old and the men of renown. There were giants in the earth in those days, and they were the heroes. Yet then it says, and the Nephilim were also on the earth in those days. So the big question I have is, are the Nephilim actually the offspring of the Watchers, of the sons of God and human women, or are they a completely different race? And I know the heroes of old and men of renown, that's the language used to describe the Gibborim, which is the ancient Hebrew mythological gods, the giant gods that were protectors of the earth. And this is where giants came in. And so all of this stuff, these are all things I'm going to revisit because I may have erroneously, like everybody else has done over the years, automatically assumed that the Nephilim were the children of the Watchers and humans. Yet, and that's where we're told the origins are, but they're linked to the origin stories. Yeah. But it seems that the language is saying that they already existed.
Well, you even said in your book, if I can break in for just a second, I don't mean to, you even said in your book in the first couple chapters, in fact,
I see David nodding.
Yeah, you even mentioned that in ancient Sumerian culture, they had these stories that predate. So Moses, as a prince of Egypt, would have been learning all of this ancient, to him it was ancient history. He was learning how to read cuneiform, and he was studying all this before he ever wrote Genesis. So he pulled from that. So that would suggest that they were probably, and you made a case in here that it was probably, and you don't like to use the term necessarily, but star seeds.
Yeah, maybe, and it may have been. I tend to, and I don't mean this is offensive to anybody. It's the same thing I say to Christians and Jews that I know, is that I don't ever want to step on anybody's. There's Rowan. That's my
little, sweetie.
So I don't want to step on anybody's religious or spiritual sensibilities. But starseed, my first contact with, no pun intended, with those words was always in a very new age setting. And I always cringed. I said, I never want to be new age. It's not what I am. And so it caused me problems until I started looking into it and saying, well, probably more in common with that term than I would like to admit. But, oh, by the way, what do you get when you play new age music backwards? New age music. All right.
Well, we have a Lori Duran, and hello everybody in the chat room. Sorry we didn't get a chance to do a big shout out But it's good to see everyone here, and thank you for coming. Lori Duran, it keeps bouncing around on me, Lori. She says, Scotty, are you saying the Nephilim and Elohim are the same?
No. I used to think that the Nephilim were the offspring of the Elohim. The Elohim are very different beings. I think what you have in the Old Testament, very established, is a pantheon of gods. Elohim, or later another name for God in the Old Testament, Jehovah. Now we find out Elohim and Jehovah aren't the same person. These are two different people. You also have God speaking to the cast of the divine council in Psalm 82, and that divine council is the Elohim. God calls them in that passage. God refers to them as the Elohim. Now, so no, I'm not comparing the two or equating the two. The Nephilim I used to think were the offspring of the Elohim and the human women, but I don't think that so much anymore, and I'm going to write about that a little bit. As a matter of fact, if you go to the book of Enoch, what does it tell? Elohim does mean God, Lori. Elohim means God. It means it's for all the names of God in the Old Testament, and you can find them all and say the angel of the Lord, Elohim, El Shaddai, El Elyon, what was the other? Jehovah. All of these different, there's other names for God. The one used the most in the Old Testament was a little over, I think, 2,700 times, and that was Elohim. Yet the definition is God of many gods. The him you see there, just like in the word Nephilim, that him suffix on the end of the word denotes plurality. So like with Nephilim, you've got Nephal, which means to fall, to come down, to descend, to leave one's first estate. And then you add the him on the end, it just pluralizes. Those who fell, those who came down, those who left their first estate. And so Elohim means that. Jehovah means something completely different. And then you've got these two different characters. And Elohim seems to be at the beginning in the Old Testament, then it transfers over to, in a new covenant, it transfers over to Jehovah. Which both of these words, by the way, come from Sumerian words or Mesopotamian words. If you look at the transmission or the movement of religion and people from the Euphrates River Valley down into what became known as the Canaanite region, and Israel is there now. Yeah. It wasn't Palestine in the past. That's newer political. It was Canaan. And in Canaan, you had the what's the word? I said transmission. That's not the right word. The migration of people from the Euphrates River Valley, and they brought with them these terms. El was the term for God. As a matter of fact, you see it in the Anunnaki culture. The gods, you had Elil or Enlil. You had Enki, and Enki also known as Ea. And so these terms became, Elil became El in the Canaanite culture, the word for God. Elohim, the God of many gods. Enki, known as Ea in the Akkadian culture, Ea became the base word for Yahweh, which is the Hebrew word for Jehovah. And so we've got these two characters coming down as they start as two very different gods. And this is what you referenced, Teresa. Moses would have known all this. Yeah. And I don't think there's any reason to believe Moses wasn't a real. As a matter of fact, that guy right there is who I believe is Moses. Senenmut out of the 18th dynasty. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the bust that was made for me, and of Senenmut. And by the way, this anecdotal, my good friend John Ward, who wrote the Exodus Reality with me, one of the times I was over there, we went looking for Hatshepsut's quarry, Hatshepsut being the female pharaoh in the 18th dynasty. She was the wife of Tutmosis II, who died. She was the daughter of Tutmosis I, and her son was Tutmosis III. And she was kind of reigned in between his co-regent, then took over. And she had this quarry. And so John walked over to the quarry of Hatshepsut after I had left. And he grabbed this big stone and he brought it to one of the local artisans in Luxor. And the guy carved that bust of Senenmut for me.
Yeah.
So, Moses, I don't think there's any reason to doubt that he existed, that he wrote the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. People say, well, there's no proof that Moses ever existed. And I say that is a bunch of hooey. There's tons of proof that the man existed. It's and we'll leave it at that.
Scotty, it's if I could just interrupt for a second again, it's almost 9:45.
Oh boy,
Eastern time, and so I just wanted to let Lori, because I don't see very well with the chat screen, to acknowledge our friends who have joined us this evening real quick, and then give the panel an opportunity to ask you a couple questions they may have come here tonight to ask you, because I know you got
I'm just yakking away.
No, that's all right. I just wanted to make sure that they had a chance to ask you a couple of the questions. Lori, why don't you go ahead and...
Yeah, absolutely.
Squinting here.
Lori Duran, thanks for being here.
Hey, Lori.
Williams, Truth Seeker, always good to see Truth Seeker. Susie Q, glad to have you with us. Thyle Parkinson, good to see you as always. Elderberry, good to see you. Siani Reese, always a pleasure. Let's see, who else do we have here? Lucky Stone, Michelle Cannon Free, Steve Clark, good to see you.
Steve.
Let's see who else we have.
Doug was in here earlier.
Yep.
Doug's here.
Yep, Doug Stack.
Yeah, Gazakov,
and Field Guy. Good to see you.
David Castle, Niles here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, Mary Wins.
Audrey, always a pleasure to have Audrey with us. Yeah.
Audrey.
Audrey.
Is here. Yeah.
Jules is here too.
Yeah.
Great.
Hey, Jules.
Basically, it's the Soul Tribe, everybody. And everybody knows who the Soul Tribe is. So
yeah, we do.
Welcome. And thanks for being with us.
Yeah.
What about Crystal?
David.
Oh, Crystal MacArthur. Sorry.
Oh, Crystal.
Yep.
Oh, she's on here as Olive Hill Soapery.
Yep.
Threw me off there, Crystal. So David Knoll, you're on mute, but did you have any questions at this point for Scotty with what he's been going through so far? What he's shown, how he's traced this back? It's pretty interesting.
Yes, I agree. And thank you, Scotty, for all that you've done and for all y'all here, and hi to everybody in the chat. One of the things you said about, having letters by your name, PhD means piled higher and deeper. So just so that, and these days anymore, y'all like that joke, but it is, PhD, and this was told to me by a person that had a PhD. It means piled higher and deeper. So, but anyway, but in the study of the giants, and regardless of what they're named now, most folks know that I have, I'm still studying Native American histories and traditions and so forth. And the native peoples, I can't verify that so much of the southern tribes in South America, but the North American tribes all know that they came from the stars at some point, except those who have emerged from the earth, which is sort of a quandary thought. But a lot of them, of the native peoples, without having anything ever to do with the European or, the other side of the planet, they have had these traditions that are thousands of years old. And simply because they didn't write them down, they told the stories. And some of the stories are literally, I know of a legend keeper from the Tlingit tribe, and those legends are over 3,200 years old. So somebody says, well, it's not written down, it's not part of the Bible. But here's the thing, the stories about how things happened, the stories about floods, the reason why there was a flood, and different native traditions discuss how, we told a story yesterday on Milky Way Soul Tribe, in where one of the star children, father came down and did this thing, and his daughter got swept away and was raised by grizzly bears. and she ended up growing up there and marrying one of the grizzly bears and having children and so forth. Now that could be a story of the giants, because the grizzlies are the biggest, the tallest, and and it's star people coming out of the clouds and stepping onto the mountain, Mount Shasta. So there is all these similarities: mountains, clouds, things,
just
and
like
a lot of it has to do with coming from the sky. Guess what's on the other side of the clouds? Stars. Just saying. But in the native traditions, though, there's so much information, like the story I read last night about lifting up the sky. They were a little mad at Creator. All the critters on the earth were mad at Creator because the sky was too close to the earth. So everybody got together, regardless of animals, birds, you name it. Everybody got together. And at the same time, on the same day, they all pushed the sky up higher. And because there were people who were bumping their heads on the clouds. So they knew that in the stories, the story was about people working together, but in the story is about these tall people who bump their heads on the clouds, having nothing to do with being on a mountain, but they bump their heads on the sky. So they knew about giants, regardless of what they're called, named, or whatever. So I think we should just sort of accept that there were giants on this planet. Certainly. Regardless of whether it was over there and it was written down and there was, and all, because on the other side of the world, there were things happening. Just because it didn't get written down didn't mean that it didn't happen over there as well. Okay. Thank you, Scotty.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see, what time is it? It's 8:50. I got about 5 more minutes. I hate to say this, guys. I'm sorry. I have to bolt because I've got my own show at 9 o'clock. Now, let's see. Some of you are, who's from Australia again? Jules
and Jules Mandy? Had a question. Yeah, Jules had a question.
It's like tomorrow there already, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. Jules, what's your question for Scotty?
Well, I just wanted to share a story. A lady and I do energy work. And this year she had a young guy ring her, or I don't know how old he was, and he was working on his alternator in his car. And he had 3 tall beings come stand beside him, and he made the 4th, and they went and held up the firmament. So that has a bit to do with what David just said. Wow. So he remembers doing that, whether it now or in the past, not sure, but this is what he was telling her. But another thing, because I do pull words apart, and you did say that UK changed to EN-UK. Well, I look at Nephilim and look at it as Ne, which is born, Phil, which means love or bond of friend, and I am. So you could look at them that they were born of love.
Well,
if you look at the Greek, because so that's what I do. I pull spells apart. And even in Hebrew, I can see hidden messages in those words as well. So language has a lot to do with mixing things up.
A very interesting point about that you bring up is if you look at the book of Enoch, it talks about the 200 prefects who came down and set foot on the slopes of Mount Armon, which is Mount Hermon. And they went in unto the women. And there's all this negativity that's attributed to them, that they were evil, they were of Satan, they were fallen angels. Yet the word for angel, which is malach in the Hebrew, or malachim in the plural, never used in the passage. They're referred to as the Elohim. And what does it say about them? It says that they went in to the women, the human women, and they chose whichever ones they loved. And they cohabited with them. That these beings who came down and impregnated human women didn't do it like we are mighty space celestial conquerors. They came down and they wanted to be like us. And they fell in love with these women and married them. And taught them and lived with them. So I thought that was a very interesting point about that and about the Elohim. And, another point I heard that just kind of ties in ever so slightly, Nakash in the Garden of Eden. What was his great sin, according to Judaism, according to, well, he's the devil, he's Satan, he's Lucifer in incarnate form. Yet it never calls him any of those things in the passage. It's not attributed to him, Satan, or any of those terms until 1,000 years later, when one of the prophets wrote, that old serpent, the devil. All he's called is Nakash by that name. And what was the forbidden treasure that he gave to humanity? Sex. And so in essence, I heard it was Aldous Huxley, I believe it was, who said, no, it wasn't him. He had another quote. Sorry, I'm mixing them up. An author that I read, and he said, and I won't use the more crass term for the sensibilities on the show, but he said, talking of Adam and Eve, he said, because they effed, he says, we're all screwed. Because he gave the gift of sex and that forbidden knowledge of the gods, which is a common theme. David, you know this. I'm sure a lot of you over here know this. The common theme in first families and the fallen race, or the race that angers the gods. What is it? It's that they were given forbidden knowledge of the gods and they practiced it and went on. And so there you go. Love. If you want to talk about love and you want to talk about commingling and things like that, this all came from that original story. So
can I bring something up?
Yes.
I wanted to add this earlier, but you brought it back up to my attention. Anyway, there is, for me, growing up a Catholic and having talked to priests and nuns who basically left the church and so forth, and I also haven't had my own revelations in looking at the Bible and the fallen angels. But did they fall? The question was, I have always asked, why did they fall from grace, or did they fall in battle? Did they fall out of grace because they chose to be here with the women and they fell in love, and that was the sin? It had nothing to do with, the gods up in the skies were going, oh, you can't do that mess, so we're going to curse you.
Yep.
So this idea, though, that the angels were fallen, to me has always been suspect. And my biggest one, did they fall in battle?
Well, that is actually one of the definitions of the word nephal, is to, one of the descriptors for it is to fall as in falling in battle. So that is one of the definitions itself. And what does it say? That Shemyaza, who was the leader of these 200, came to them all, and he said to them, hey, we're going to get our asses kicked because God doesn't want us to do this. Elohim doesn't want us to do this. And all the rest of these guys said, I don't care. We don't care what you're saying. We're going to do this anyway. And they made a pact in the book of Enoch amongst themselves to stay with the human women because they loved them. And there's always this negative, nasty connotation put into it when it wasn't that at all. So,
right. I absolutely agree. And for whatever purposes of covering that part up, because I've talked about Sister Helene, one of the Dominican nuns at Tampa Catholic, and in 1970 she said, listen, Jesus went and studied Buddha. When he disappeared, Jesus went and studied Buddha. They're not going to tell you that, but I can tell you, because now that you've graduated and we're just having conversation, listen, because I wanted to become a priest, and she told me no, study Buddhism, because that's what Jesus did. And so I've had this understanding that there's been something strange about the story ever, from the get-go. But there was also things she discussed back in 1970 when we had long discussions together. And some of that was, did the angels fall from the grace of God, or did they fall in war or whatever? So, but anyway, so thank you for that. And there are many different native stories that talk about that the gods were angry for one reason or another. The other thing too, your description, it's not of a snake in the garden. And in many of the stories, the native stories that I have read, and one recently, like last night, was that one of the creators stepped in and asked Coyote, who most all know that is the trickster. So the trickster became creator for a while. And in that, some of the other elders were going, well, what about this? Oh, well, okay, creators gave me the power here for a day or so, and so he creates the platypus kind of thing. So, but the idea, though, that in the story and how you described it, it's also, to me, it could have been the trickster, if you will, in the native stories, to who was the entity or the being, and also the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. Fruit could be fruit of the womb, not fruit of the loom, but so, and I just wanted to say that too. Okay, I'm done.
All right. And I saw Mandy, you had a question too, and I've got a bolt. I can't.
Yeah,
but,
I'll let you bolt.
All right. And Teresa gave you my email. You can also get a hold of me on my Facebook page, Mr. Scotty Roberts, I think it is. Mr.mr.scotty.roberts, I think is what my Facebook page is. So there you go. I got to go. I got less than a minute to
go
get
ahead,
my own
Scotty.
show
I'll
started.
tell everybody where to get your book and how to get to your videos. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody, for having me. I appreciate it.
Scotty.
Thank you, Scotty.
Appreciate you.
All right.
Really appreciate
See you
Scotty.
later.
Love
Good
you.
night. You
Bye-bye.
too.
All right, folks. Well, Scotty's program will be starting up soon, so if you have to hop over, go ahead. For those of you who don't realize this, Scotty actually narrated his own book, so it's on audio. You can purchase it on Amazon. You can also go to Queen of Quartz Crystal Network.com and see Scotty's webpage. He actually, it's his voice. He has it on archive for free. Go to his YouTube channel, subscribe to Scotty Roberts, Intrepid Radio program, and go to 2 years ago. Scroll down through his videos. 2 years ago, he actually narrates his own book. It's not a huge book. It's not that long, but he spends a good 3, 4, maybe 5 videos on it, gets into greater detail, and actually starts talking a little bit more about the Watchers and who the Watchers might be, and that's another whole segment. You can't possibly cover it all at one time. But his books you can order from him directly off of his website, or you can go through Amazon.com and order his books. He's got another one called The Reptilians, where he goes into a great detail about who are they and how we might be interconnected with the reptilian race. So many things. The man's got some great books.
Yeah, fascinating.
But just wanted you to know that you can get to him through crystalnetwork.com through our gateway.
It's in the description for you folks.
Yeah. Yeah, Lori did a great job with the opening video too for Scotty. That was great. Thank you, Lori.
You betcha.
So I'm sorry if the panel, I mean, it's really hard to break in. There's so much content there.
It's all good.
But we have a couple minutes here. We can continue this discussion ourselves. David, if you want to add anything. I wanted to ask Scotty about the Watchers and about how this all relates in terms of what we all understand to be alien influence there.
Yes, basically. And the Watchers, through some of the different stories through the native folk.
Yeah.
And all of them, I mean, down in South America and Peru and Chile and down in there, So, and it is very ancient, the megaliths down there, they're very ancient. And a bunch of short Chilean peoples did not build these things on their own high up in the Andes, I'm sorry. Machu Picchu and those kind of things, and they were constructed knowing about the sides of the land and the mountain and how it was terraced and how they put drains in. I mean, it's a really big deal. So we have to understand that, yes, we've had intervention from outside sources. And, that's going to be one of the things that scares everybody. But when I'm hanging around with native peoples, they just know it. And they just go, yeah, well, call them UFOs or whatever, but, there are Sky Brothers and sisters,
Sky
and that's
Brothers,
where the elders came from, the ancients. And so the Watchers are also kind of mixed in with some of the native stories, in that those ancients are also the Watchers. Now, it doesn't mean they're all of the same race, but I look at it as sort of like a council of tribes. Okay. And so you've got this guy, but they're all Watchers, but this could be the Northwest, tribe up in Washington or Alaska. And the other ones could be, the Southeast and Cherokee and Choctaw. And, so they're all Indians. They're all part of the tribe, of the larger tribe, but we're not, you know what I mean? So, but in that, so they understand that the sky people are absolutely, they just accept it. It's not a question. Well, UFOs, yeah, oh, okay, but they're there. And of course we come from them, and, but those aren't necessarily, quote, the gods that control the weather, because they give honor to all things of nature and give thanks to the universe, where a lot of people think they worship. It's not. It's all about honor and respect to the universe. So, and personally, in that the boat people came over and had to get rid of that train of thought, because that's too spiritual. We can all talk straight to the Creator, and in all the other areas, it's all about a God or a religion you must follow in order to achieve that. But with all of that said, though, Scotty talked about, the elders, the Elohim, and the Watchers and all that. Also, in the last book of the Bible, in Revelations, when the angel comes and talks with John, and John falls to his knees, and the angel says, he does this twice, and he says, "Get up, you are as I am." Now, for anybody who doesn't have any faith, and to me, forget the rest of the Bible and what it says. That last chapter in the last book of the Bible, it says we are as they are. So however we were created or wherever it started from, the bottom line is we are as they are, whoever they are. But also in that when you die and you sit with God amongst the elders, it mentions the elders several times in the book of Revelations. And so the idea of the elders, the Watchers, the ancients, depending on the version of Bible that you get, they interchange those names. So I think they basically mean a council of whoever, of the elders, like in a tribal council. And these are the elders. And, one of the elders might pass on or go someplace else. So they're, after all of our years here, there could be another elder on the council, but it would still be the same council. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So we have to take these kinds of things into context of this. Because as Scotty was talking about, there isn't one God. There's never several names, and there's this guy and the sons of, and this guy over here, and then there's the elders and the Watchers. So it kind of, in a way, kind of shoots the idea that there was just a God involved in this, that there were lots of folks who were doing stuff, but it focuses on the God of the Bible. So, and even in the Bible, it doesn't talk about one, it talks about the many. So when we think about things, we have to just take this into consideration and just go, this will blow your mind when you expand upon it. But somebody wrote it down, somebody followed through. People have changed it over the years as much as we want to say it's the original. So. But I do think there's truth in it. I do think Moses saw the burning bush, but it wasn't the bush that was burning. There were things as a kid, in Catholic school, I just, I was like, that was probably some kind of alien or something, And
yeah. When I was like about 16, 17, I was going through a spiritual awakening, if you will, and sort of pushing back on the church with some of their misinformation. And I was doing a lot of my own study into some of this. And I read chariots of the gods, you know, and I started reading In Search of Noah's Ark, and you know, and so I was starting to get into some of this research, and I'm like, I'm getting out the Hebrew version of the Bible, the American Standard, the NIV Bible. I got out like 5 or 6 different resources and a Bible study guide, and I went through every line of scripture myself, and I highlighted every reference to what I could only call an otherworldly encounter. So I came to the conclusion in my early teens and later early 20s, after further research, I just came to this conclusion. This is without a spiritual gnosis per se, that there's so much in these ancient texts, including scripture, biblical scripture, no matter what version you look at. You can call it an angel, you can call it a messenger, you can call it an extraterrestrial, you can call it an interterrestrial. They are not human. They are from not of this place. They are either from the cosmos or they are from another dimension, but they've been interacting with mankind all this time. What I couldn't figure out is how that related to the stories of the giants and how there might be, until Scotty came along with his book, and I read that 2 years ago. I'm like, oh, that explains a lot, because we have split off into 2 bloodlines. We have the very human bloodline that our spirits, you know, came into and helped create, and then we have a whole bloodline or DNA of people who come from a mix of the human and whatever this extraterrestrial, interterrestrial entity is within us. So we're not all purely human bloodline. We're not all pure.
Nice.
Some of us are hybrids. Go ahead, Jules. That's where I'm thinking right now. Go ahead, Jules.
Well, because I work with words, and you look at the word Elohim, you've got Elohim. So there's him on the end of it, and El is what we stand upon, our foundation, which is our leg.
Our legs
right?
and feet.
There's the L. There's the L. Angels are just angle beings. They muck with the language. If you look at the word Noah, we're all knowers, aren't we? We're all knowers. Okay? Look at the spell. Trace is just the crossing point of a race. See the T? And then you have race after it. Okay? Just look at the English. We've been given English to undo this spell, right? Then you look at the word, where did I write it? There's a few things. Oh, Eretz in Hebrew, Eretz, E-R-E-T-Z. E-R are the watchers in Hebrew, E-R, and E-T-Z are trees. You've got watchful trees, which is land. Eretz means land or earth. When you pull the Hebrew apart, it is Era, Etz, and ETZ is trees. So whatever you want to think of, the giants, whatever they were, falling, well, branches fall and so do leaves. We fall. So they could have been, I'm just giving a different angle.
Sure.
I do not have 1 degree.
Yeah.
I have not 1 degree either. I haven't got no letters behind my name. I've done a lot of searching. See arch in, or see the king in, seeking, right? No one's taught me anything from anything. I've gone and looked it up myself, and I've undone the spell as what I do. So just because it was spelled a certain way, and even Scotty showed us how they changed the way it was spelt, and that's where you get the confusion. So you've got to go and look. You've got to go and English, which was Anglish because of all the angles of the letters, right? So there's a lot of things hidden in the old Hebrew and even in our English, how I undo the spell, okay? So everything written is a story. Everything written is a story. And I have just told you another version.
Yes, you have. And I
Well-
like this conversation between Niall and Audrey, David, because Niall's almost saying what I was hitting at. Two different stories here of the earth and from outside the earth. There's far more evidence for demons than there is for aliens. Audrey says, well, what if they're one and the same? Niall says, where'd it go? It just bounces on me all the time. Good question, Audrey, but I think there are two separate parties with two agendas, but you might be right. What do you think about that, David?
Extraterrestrial is just extra more of territory beyond the ice wall.
And Truth Seeker added to that. You have a point there. In India, what you call demons were called asuras, a constant battle described between devas and asuras. All these beings, all these entities. I mean, you know, it's hard to say what comes from Earth and what comes from outside of Earth. I think it's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's going to freak people out when the truth comes out about the UFO thing, that we have so many different families in space. We're only counting this one on this earth, this time. And the Bible and the Hebrew Bible, remember this, my friends, is just one people's point of view.
That's right.
Yeah.
You just have to,
One point of view.
The Chinese don't necessarily, the Hindus don't necessarily, you know, the native peoples didn't even know that story until the Spanish came over, you know.
Yeah.
That's
So,
right.
but this
There's
idea,
infinite
we have
points
to
of view.
understand that giants were here as a race, possibly of ETs. And there is Native American stories where all the people were just fed up with the giants for whatever reason, and they went out and killed them all. They just all banded together and they hunted them down and killed them all in North America. You know, and that's why they disappeared here. And, you know, with that kind of welcome, they wouldn't want to come back. But there is not just two splits. It's two splits in that story. There are other stories in other parts of the planet that there are splits, and that this is one of the stories of some of the peoples on this planet that we have
Alien
to take
just means
into
another.
consideration.
That's all
Yeah.
alien means. Another.
Yeah.
You
Another.
know, someone could come from another state and they're alien to me because I don't talk that language. Just means another. We're all just another. We're just all others. Look at Mother. She's another.
She's another mother.
And, you know,
From a different lover.
Just in the fact of North Americans and people that are finding out that they have Native American heritage, there was so much intermingling in the Americas when the whites came over. They overran the Indians and this and that. And there is, you know, I did a video on it a couple of months ago, in that we're all natives in America. And many of us honestly do have Native American blood in us. And for those of you possibly in Australia, I don't know about the intermingling, but, you know, I'm sure that there were, you know, mixed marriages. And at some point, the blood was split, if you will. And
Kieran,
so
blood.
Isn't there such a thing as delusion? Can't you dissolve over time? I don't know much about genetic engineering or DNA, but it would seem to me that over centuries and centuries and centuries of interbreeding and intermixing and interbreeding, you would eventually wash out some that, you know, that it would be like such trace amounts that people are running around going, oh, we have this alien DNA. And I'm like, calm down. No, but you know, we're going to get zapped up. They're going to fuck with our DNA. I'm like, calm down. How much could you possibly have?
Yeah, I agree with you, David. They already
have.
Yes, they have.
You know, we're the only creature on this earth that when you look at our DNA, there's that twist on the end. We're the only creatures on this planet that have that. No apes, no nothing. And people want to dismiss it. Oh, that we're descended from apes. If you want to be descended from an ape, I'd much rather be descended from an alien. I'm just saying, you know, and the apes were a prototype possibly, but I'm not descended from them, you know.
Right. There is some talk. There is some talk about humans that the apes are descendants from humans, not the other way around. There's
Right.
a lot of talk about that right now.
If you look at the RH in it, RHI, if you go back to rhizome, it means root. If you look at the root word, naturally, look at the root word, RHE or RHI, it actually comes from like rhizome. You know, that's the root of something.
Right.
Right? It
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's the rhesus as in the monkey. You look to the root, which is if you look in my dictionary, I did that this morning. I was looking up at the root of rhesus, you know, and it comes back to rhizome virtually to do with just the root.
Yeah. Well, folks,
I know, Lori, hang on a second.
Okay.
Spirited woman, she heard once that the Jewish folks worship ETs. Is there any truth to that? I'm going to go first on this one. I studied Judaism for years and years and years and had very close friends. We were all in a community together. Nowhere did they ever even think, or did we even touch on extraterrestrials. Now, it might be that there's some things in their lore that is related to that but they're not aware of it and don't recognize it in that way. So no, they don't worship ETs, not intentionally anyway. That's my answer to that.
Not intentionally, yeah, but I don't think that I've known many some very good friends of mine were Jewish, and nowhere, in fact, one of them is sort of like a stand-in rabbi, and very good people, very traditional, giving people, and if they're worshiping anything bad, now maybe their genes did come from a certain race of ET. That is a possibility. I mean, because, you know, one of the things that has always puzzled me, so Eve had 3 sons. Okay, so how did Cain went off, and who did he find? Where did he build a city? For what? For who? Himself? Where did somebody else was there? Otherwise, then how did he start a family? How did he start a bloodline if he ran away from, and what about Seth? Who he married? Did he have sex with his mama? And I mean, are we going to go there? You know, and it has always bothered me in that it started out here, and then all of a sudden there's all these other he begot and she begot and they begot, and there was a lot of begotten going on back then, let me tell you. But there had to have been the races, other peoples, if Cain wandered off and built a city. Otherwise, why'd he build a city? And who helped him? I mean, come on, let's break this down. Who was there and why? What was his purpose to build a city? Well, he built a city, but okay. And they just keep going. They don't stop there and scratch their heads.
I have a final question for each one of you, for every single one of you on the panel. Answer this. What does any of this that we've talked about tonight have to do with our spiritual development and our tapping into our higher conscious mind and our purity of spirit with Creator and worship, and understanding and respecting the Creator and the reason we're here and our purpose? What does any of this have to do with it? Does it not distract us from our path? How does it help us spiritually to understand all this history? Why do people talk about it so darn much, and why are they so adamant about it?
Well, I don't usually talk about it. I don't talk about the past as much as I said to you the other day, Teresa. I'm more of the future girl. I'm from the future, not from the past, because I don't remember any of my past much at all. I have no inkling of what I've been, only that I always say about a tree, but I don't see anything. So I focus on that the book is actually an alchemy book or a chemistry book. Eve is actually Ava, which is a wave. Okay, it's just the electronic and the magnetic. That's all. It's a book of chemistry and alchemy, and it's all inside of us. So I've got to run. I've got a hot date, guys. See ya.
On that note, I agree with you, Jules.
Ooh la
100%.
la.
Yes.
Thank you,
All
darling.
right.
Bye.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jules, for sharing that.
Yep.
What about
Thanks,
you, Laurie? What do you think?
I agree with Jules. I think just being more in the future, we're all here to expand and to be more than we were when we came into this life. When we leave these bodies and we go to the etheric realms, we have instant all-knowing. I think we do this just to have some fun.
Yeah.
That's it, in a nutshell.
Well, David, what do you
Oh,
think? Because he
okay.
asks a lot of the same questions I do. It's like we look at these things and we're like, does it really help us with what we need to do now?
And the short answer is no, because it is a distraction for our own personal spiritual growth. But at the same time, I have to say so, but for those people who are so inclined to find out that it is important, but it isn't the only thing that's important.
Right.
And I think people get lost in the importance of what they're studying. But for me, understanding about, I have just accepted years ago that of course giants were here. Of course,
there's bones.
I'm
There's
from
proof.
the stars. Of course. So where people are still studying this, they have to find evidence. And the evidence will convince them that, okay, I can believe this now. Because, so it's about belief in that. So they want to believe, but okay, I'm from Missouri, I'm from the show me state. Show me the bones, show me the evidence, show me the DNA, show me the stuff. And it's been covered up, dug up by the Smithsonian and people for centuries now. There's a lot of evidence there. And there's evidence that the Native Americans destroyed the bones and killed. And so, but anyway, so they didn't want to be remembered, but in the old stories, the giants were here. I've looked at the pyramids, and I see giants. I see 35 foot, which were supposedly like an average size of a certain type, a 35-foot tall being able to lift one of these blocks into place.
Right.
And all the little guys running around just got in his damn way or her way, depending. And from a young age, I've always suspected there's something about this story. Now, regardless of why the pyramids are there, that's a separate issue, but who built them, I think there were giants, and it states there were giants in those days.
Yeah.
So the great big monoliths, the huge stones that we can't move with our modern equipment. How did they do that? If there's a really tall being, 2 or 3 of them could move a rock real easy like humans can. It explains a lot that isn't really a mystery, but people need proof. We are such a, I needed
it. That's why I studied for that's why I tore the Bible apart inside and out. I was looking for answers. I wanted proof, but in the end.
And the thing is, though, when we get to a certain point, and in the Bible, for me, when I was going back through the Bible several years back, I said, there's giants in those days. I didn't need to go any further. I just stopped right there and said, now, see, they told us the truth right in the beginning, pay attention. Yeah. So in the spiritualness of this, what we need to understand, why is it important to know that there were giants in those days? Because there's still races of giants in the universe. Just like there are fairies and etherical things, there are giant beings compared to us. That all things are possible. Why is this important for us to understand this? It's so that we can believe that, yes, these things did happen. Yes, it's still possible. And in the realm of spirituality, it's the acceptance of all of these things. And there's enough evidence. I believed it years ago, so other people are still on the fence about it. And not against Scotty in any way. No, I don't. But, then there are people who write books about it, like Scotty, because it is that important to him. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that.
It's perception. It's all about perception.
It's what you perceive.
what you think.
I've known it as a truth all along. I've accepted it a long time ago. And I just don't, in this day and age with everything that's going on, and I've got to go back to David for a private session again. I have difficulty coming to terms with the whole, even though I understand we've been visited many, many times and may even have been populated here and partially seeded here with other entities. I have a hard time getting my head around the fact that there's all these factions that are still in operation out there, that they're warring amongst one another, that they've got this whole Star Wars type thing going on, okay, or Star Trek type situation going on, and that we really are important to them. Now, our little speck, our little blue planet, then an entire universe, multi-universes, why would they want to be screwing with little old Earth? And I had this discussion with David not so long ago. It's been a while, but it's been a few weeks since we talked about that, David. And I still have difficulty feeling comfortable. I feel really uncomfortable in chat rooms where they're discussing this. Yeah. Not because I'm being judgmental. It's because I don't have that gnosis yet. A lot of you do, and some of you are I hate to use the word channeling, getting messages. So somehow from these ancient alien races that I'm just like, it's nowhere in my gnosis. I'm not getting it in my spiritual meditations or through my guides. I'm just not feeling it yet. And I'm not worried about it either. But there are folks that are just really worried about this galactic. They're like, oh, we have this whole galactic group of angelic type ETs that are trying to save the Earth. And then we have these others that are working with our government and infiltrating our government. And it's just so not my gnosis. But it doesn't mean you all are wrong and I'm right. There's no right or wrong here. I'm just saying I don't feel it yet. And so when I go, I feel everything from my heart space and that connection with Great Spirit and the Christos. And I feel so comfortable. I know there's bad things going on, but I don't feel any of this fear or this angst or this, I've got to talk to the Galactic Federation and sign up. I just don't feel it. So what's wrong? Is that wrong of me, or is it, my intuition tells me, don't worry about it.
Well, in so many ways, there isn't anything that we can do. And one of my missions here is that as we get together as a group, as a soul tribe, as the, as I'm always talking about, the League of Like-Minded Beings, these entities hear us. Before 5 years ago, they didn't hear anything. It's sort of like go back to that Star Trek movie where Spock and them had to go back in time to get whales. So the aliens that are like, well, if nobody cares and they are just a bunch of savages down there and we don't hear any of them, and it's all about, wealth and greed and so why should we help them folks down there? Why should we put ourselves at risk? And then we woke up.
Yeah.
And in the last 8 to 10 years, since about 2012, many of us have woken up in different ways. I remember Brian and I talking about when we woke up and when something hit us, that something was different. Not that I'm trying to name drop Brian, but he's been on my mind here recently and been kind of hanging out with me. But anyway, but in this understanding, it's not so much that you need to understand the war, but that it's been going on forever. It's not new. We just have new devices to take pictures of these things. And for whatever reason, there are entities who said enough is enough with the planet Earth. There's too many people who have woke up and we're not going to allow you to annihilate them because the people, think of the television program V, one of the entities that they really will eat us, destroy us. They do not care. They do not have compassion for themselves, one another, and the same thing with the other mater. They're even more vicious and there is no compassion. So we have to understand that these races have just decided that because they are who they are, that they can do whatever they want with this. And there are the good races that are going, no, sorry. We are located way out here on the edge of the galaxy, so we're not on any normal trade routes, if you will. So, but there's been enough going on here that the whatever you want to call them, the council of folk have said, now we can't sit by. We need to intervene. And so there are many of us, whether or not you believe in ET or not, I send my energy out to the universe and say, if there's anybody out there, yes, we would like your help. And thank you for.
Yeah, I do that much. I go that far. Yes.
Yeah. So
It's in
whether
my
you
intent.
or not you understand it anymore, there are times when I wished I didn't understand more, but I understand for my job and for why I'm here and what I do is to try to help people to slowly get this. This has been, it's been going on for a million years. This is not just a couple of thousand years. It's been going on for a long time. Okay.
Yeah.
And but Native Americans and Native peoples, why I associate more with them is that they are just born with knowing it.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Yeah.
But other cultures, we have to learn about it. And it's, they just know it. And I think that some of the star kids these days, they woke up knowing it. Because I know some young people myself, and they just know stuff that other folks don't. They're too young to know this, and they're still connected. And because I know their parents, and their parents haven't tried to wash it away.
Is it that, David, or is it because they've got 6 times more the amount of sci-fi than we had growing up on every channel, on every major network, in every movie theater, in every book they read, in every story they share at school? Sci-fi, 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 sci-fi. Is not sci-fi programming them into having this perspective? Is it their new reality? Whereas we had religious programming, they've got sci-fi programming.
And even in watching Miss Pac-Man, and one of my friends turned me on, he goes, this is what my kids are watching. Watch this. And I was like, it's Pac-Man. Yeah, but watch this. They were impeaching the president in one of these Pac-Man videos and how they went about it. And the Pac-Man people were, doing this impeachment on a cartoon for little kids. They're having impeachment. I mean, just the idea of it in a cartoon. And this was not too long ago. But the idea, though, that, I've been watching some of the old cartoons, and yes, we were programmed. And for me, the old sci-fi was to believe that there were other things possible. Versus, He-Man, I'm going to get a sword and I'm going to be the defender of the good. There ain't nothing really wrong with that, the sword and everything. Okay, but that's been a story back to King Arthur's day. But the idea, though, that some of these things, but my point in some of this is that the 2 young ladies that I know, one's 4 years old, and she don't watch sci-fi. But there is a connection that this 4-year-old has, and some other 4-year-olds that I've met. In fact, the other one, who's a cousin, she's like going to be 14 or 13. I'm not quite sure. I think she is 13. But anyway, I knew her since she was a baby, and she's always had this different sense of reality, of knowing things. She's the top of her class. And she excels. But is there anything special about this girl? Her mother and father didn't try to whitewash her in any way. Same thing with the 4-year-old. It's not about, you got to believe this, or I'm going to drag you to church, or they don't do that. So I see this as a social phenomenon in that all of us are starseeds. If you go back to the teachings of Casey and stuff like that. So we all have a soul. We all know. I knew when I was 3 that I was going to be a hermit and live on a river in the woods. I knew that. So there are children who are born like that, star seeds, whatever you want to call us. We're all seeds from the universe. So, but when we get here, do we remember who we were? That's the issue. And in many cultures, up to the age of 7, this is on topic, by the way, but up to the age of 7, we are still connected to the God source. In Catholic religion, the age of 7 is when you get your first communion. And other, the Mormons, a lot of folks, it's the age of 7. Well, there's also the thing of 7. Every 7 years, your body regenerates. There's a bunch of numbers about 7. Won't go into that. But it boils down to belief. So this is nothing new. Society has taught us not to listen to the angels. I was slapped when I told my mother, I see Mother Mary over there, and I was like, hitting the back.
Yeah,
of the
I was
head.
too. Yeah. Bonk.
And my first communion, when I was 7, that was my first kind of vision. And nobody else saw it. And I was like, well, that's interesting. But anyway, and how my mother got over 2 rows to slap me in the back of the head in church. But anyway.
It's a special gift.
She might have used her shoe. But the bottom line in all of this, what does it mean for us? It means there's a lot of things that have been hidden from us, non-truths or whatever. And when we learn all of the stories, not just the Bible, when we learn all of the stories, we might be thankful that ET put us here. They might be a very benevolent race that somehow we got to be this prison planet with these other, the story goes is that we were dropped off here as an experiment to be left alone. And they weren't going to come back and check on us and rule us and all that kind of stuff. And then the bad guys saw, oh, look at all them people down there and nobody's ruling them. And they took over. So, it's the Elohim, it's the Anunnaki, it's this. Look, there's a bunch of them. But let's just boil it down to this. Whatever the past was, it does make us who we are now. But is it important to only focus on the past? And the answer is no. We should focus on the future. This information is great, but if you're not going to believe it, then why keep looking? If the evidence that's already presented doesn't strike you to say, well, okay, I'm just going to accept this and move on to the next subject. There's other subjects that people need to believe. It's not just about the giants, you know what I mean? So, but anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we got you. Yeah.
I got a little long-winded, but
That's all
it
good.
is all related.
No, it's a great discussion. That's why I wanted to do this tonight. I knew Scotty wouldn't have time to address all these pieces, but I knew you would. So, because we need to have these discussions from time to time. I feel the need to talk about it, especially since to me, I still get a little confused about some of it, but I just feel comfortable in my own connection and my own where I am right now
that's really what matters.
The stuff
right
where I am right now,
think.
it just doesn't, it's not that I'm afraid of it. It's just that I think that we tend to create what we put out there. And if everybody keeps talking about all these different convoluted, aren't we creating that? And it's not a perception. It's not a reality that I want to create. Now, maybe it's already happened and there's nothing I can do about it. It's already created. But moving forward, I want to create something different.
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with Star Wars. It's just not the reality that I want to move into. Doesn't mean other people.
At some point, and it's not me, but at some point, the issue is going to come to everyone.
Right.
And, the great thingy, but there are so many peoples in other countries that have already accepted that UFOs are real. It's really only the United States and Canada and some folks who are still like on the holdback. The volcano down around Mexico City. I know people that from Mexico, they used to, have houses and go to Mexico City on a frequent basis. Go, oh yeah, we in Mexico, we know about it. It's no big deal to us. So they see these things flying around all the time in the daylight, and people are like, oh, look, there goes another one kind of thing,
Yeah.
But for us, so there are cultures that already accept this. It's us here in the United States, kind of sort of primarily, that are on this going to have an issue with this information. Now, having nothing to do with what's going on presently, but the fact that, yeah, they've been here for a long time, and yeah, we are descendants, and yeah, we're in the population. Could you come up with the genes for a black person or a Chinese person, or Native American peoples or white peoples? They're different. Oh, we all go back to the same.
I have to agree with Brandy. We need to decide what the future holds. Soulless ones are trying to manipulate the future by convincing us we can't change it. I think she's absolutely right about that. And I think that, from my experience, from what I feel with my connection right now, where I am on my journey right now, is that let them fly their spaceships out there and do their thing out there. And you know what? We can be wiped out by a meteor. We could be attacked by alien spaceships. I could get hit by a car tomorrow. There could be an explosion that knocks my county off the face of the map. There could be a volcanic eruption and half the states fall into the sea. Where is my physical body going? It's going back to the earth where it came from. My spirit will be with Creator and source energy. I'll be reintegrated. Mm-hmm. And then I can decide from there, because I have free will, where to go from there. But while I'm here, I can help people. I can I can be joyful. I can enjoy my surroundings. I can plant fruits and vegetables. I can play with my dog. I can go camping. There's so much to enjoy, so much to see, and so much to do once we get through this crazy virus thing that's going on, that's another whole issue. It's just that I feel like I can create my happiness, be here. It's not that I'm sticking my head in a bucket of sand, but people say that to me. It's just like, why? That's your belief, what I'm doing. I'm not saying I'm ignoring it. I'm saying I'm accepting that it's possible. I'm observing very cautiously, but I'm not trying to create that. The more we talk about it, the more we focus on it, the more it's created. And I want to create something different.
Too much focus, yeah.
Which is a new earth. Go back to some of the, some of the universal concepts in how we treat each other and how we feel about each other and how we support one another and cherish one another, grow together into family units that aren't like I know this one family where each kid comes in and takes a bite of their dinner and runs out of the room. And another kid comes in and takes another bite of their dinner and runs out of the room. Nobody's sitting down anymore. Nobody's having fellowship in their own house. There's no interconnectedness. Everybody's just plugged into a headset. And here they are at the dinner table. I went out with a family to a restaurant to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. It was a bunch of fun. The bagpipes were out. You know what? Every kid in the booth, in the whole entire restaurant is sitting here going.
Not just kids, but a lot of people.
And they're connected to technology.
Yep.
The only concern that I'm having right now is this whole transhuman movement, because I think all these archons and all these dark forces and dark characters are trying to find a way to do what they're jealous of what we can do. We can connect with Source. They can't anymore. They screwed themselves royally. They're trapped. And so they're looking for a way out, and they're trying to feed off of our emotions and energies to make us think we can't create a better reality. And in the meantime, they're going to get involved with this robotic development, jump into these robots and try to be like humans and try to rule. That's my only concern. But I don't talk about it every day. I just put the intent out there. Hey, I think it already happened. And I think we won.
Yeah.
And it's just not a timeline that I want to jump into. Anyway, so that's, I don't want to go on and on about it, but it's just, I just feel.
Yeah.
That's
you feel how you feel.
Here's the thing about this. In what you just said, there's several different factions. And the two factions that I mentioned, the Vlash and the Mater, they have no feelings. They don't. They're not reptilians. In fact, the reptilians don't even like the Mater. That's how bad these folks are. So wrap your head around that one. But they just don't care about whether or not we have spiritual in us. They don't care. It's not in their vocabulary, if they didn't grow up as spiritual beings, they don't care, which makes them ruthless in the universe. And so this idea that, well, we can fight the forces of darkness, these guys, you know, it ain't about that you could win them over, because there is that spirit of soul does not reside in these beings, as it was told. Okay. So we're talking about soulless entities that would, you know, killing is just like for fun, you know, and, you know, but it ain't about this other stuff. Now, there are other factions that do want to confuse us and do want to do these things. So it's not one or the other or this one or that one. There are many factions. So one of the things that what I realized was I wanted to blame it on the reptilians, you know, and then when I got showed these other things, I was like, oh, there's a bunch of these assholes out there that are, you know, that just really don't care about humanity. They really want to push the button and blow the planet up because we're insignificant. We're worse than ants or cockroaches. I mean, that's how they view us. So to set off bombs to get rid of us, it has nothing to do with control or anything else. They just want to get rid of us, period.
Yeah, so true.
All right, Lori, I'm sorry. I dragged you into further overtime, and Lori's got to run, and I forgot about that. So
thank you, Lori. I'm sorry.
It's all good, David.
Sorry for yakking, Lori, and appreciate the time that you let us continue in our overtime. And I want to thank everybody in the chat room. Thanks for hanging out with us. Scotty was here. He put almost an entire hour in with us, so we were very pleased with that. And he's on his show now. So we love you, David. Everyone, and thank you, David, very much.
Much love to you.
Keep the faith and have no fear.
That's right. Have no fear.
All right, folks. Peace
out. Bye,
out.
everyone. Thank you. Love you. Thanks, Laura.